interning out there in May to July 2024. So yeah, the duration 8 to 10 weeks, approximately, that's the time. And companies from IT, electronics, chemical, mechanical, all come out here and take interns for their companies. So all of us who have, all of us who are panelists for this talk, we all have internships at various organizations. So, and we'll be taking you through how to prepare and how the whole process is going to be. So I'll quickly pass it over to Shikha, who has an internship offer from Google. So Shikha, please enlighten all of them how to get into Google.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Shikha. I will be interning at Google this summer. So I'll just like dive right in, tell you what it's about. So Google basically offers software engineering internships for like 10 to 12 weeks during the summer. That is May endish to August start. Google is a day zero company, which means it comes before most of the other companies. So for us, it came around early to mid July. The application is similar to off campus recruitment. I will take you through the application rounds and everything a little later. Let me tell you what they look for. They look for expertise in programming, which is that you should be proficient in at least one programming language. Can be Python, C++, Java. Try to keep it to these three main languages. Um, but if you know any others, they will accommodate for that as well. Then they're looking for people who can solve their problems, right? So that they judge through DSA and the projects that you've done that are on your resume, and they talk to you and they come to know your thought process when you're in the interviews and stuff. So they're looking for a good problem solver. And lastly, they're looking for someone who can work with them as a team, right? So that's where the communication, behavior, all this, your character and all, they look at that. Okay. So this is, as far as I understood, this is what they look for. If you have some leadership qualities and like community involvement, that is also a very good bonus. So if you would want to put that on your resume if you've done that. And so this time there was no official CG criteria, uh, but I would suggest to try to keep your CG above 8. And if your CG, I saw one question in the FAQs that your CG is not good enough, then what do we do? Try to have good technical projects so that they know at least that you know what you're talking about, what you're doing. They want to see that you know computer science. So try to show that in your application. Okay, so I'll move on to the rounds of the process. So there were three rounds. First one was the resume submission. Second one was the online coding challenge, which was optional, but it is recommended to give. And the third one, if you qualify for after these two, it's the technical interviews. Okay, so I'll talk about each of these. So the resume submission, you just have to submit a PDF of your resume. I would say keep the resume precise, one page only, and important factors like important stuff to include in your resume would be like your education, projects, work experience if you have any, um, achievements if you've like gotten something good, like be sure to put that on there. Your skills, like which programming languages you know, or any courses that you've taken online, and yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. There is a YouTube video by Google which tells you how to write your resume. So please go through that. It is very important. Like that is what they want. So be sure to go check that out. Okay. And in the application process, they see your resume and your online coding challenge together. Like they'll see these two things and then they'll select for interviews. So your resume is very important since the coding challenge is kind of optional also. So your resume is pretty important. So make sure that it's like really good when you're giving. Okay. Then comes the online coding challenge, which for us had two questions. It was very tough. Like it was very tough for everybody in our college. Um, any language you can be used in that, but the questions had like really advanced topics like dynamic programming, graphs, all this. So you need to be really good at DSA. You need to prepare really well to qualify, like to get even one question in this round. I'm not trying to scare you, but like yeah, that is what happened. But it's okay. Like even if we couldn't solve the questions, they looked at the resume, and that's how you got through to the interviews, right? So in the interviews, I tell you, around 10 people were shortlisted for the technical interviews. They will say that there are two interviews, two or more. They can have more interviews if they don't fully grasp how well you know your concepts in the two interviews. So, yeah, two would be ideal. If not, then three can also be taken. They'll schedule your interviews, and there were two coding interviews that were back to back for me. Those questions were not as hard as the online coding challenge. They were medium to hard level, and each interview has like ideally each interview should be two questions. Like you should be able to solve two questions in an interview. Questions will be related to each other mostly. Or if you get through the first one, they'll like extend the first question to something else. So you can like use your previous code and write that. So for me, the topics asked for sorting, maps, binary search trees, and dynamic programming. It was also recursion was used in the. I can't tell you the exact questions, but yeah, this was the broad range of topics that was covered. And the sorting and maps questions were pretty easy, like in the first interview. They also asked like theory of sorting towards the end of the interview. But for me, so I did three questions in the first interview, and like I coded three of them. And in the second one, I coded one of them and I explained the algorithm for the second one. Yeah, so in the interview, there's like a few things that you would want to take care of. Um, like I've written on the slides. There are four things that they look at: how you come up with the algorithm, how you communicate with them, how well you write your code, and how much time you kind of take to solve it, and how well you know your time complexities of the code. So the process is usually like this. Like they'll give you the question, you think for a bit, you ask them any clarifying questions if you didn't understand, and you basically tell them what you're thinking, what algorithm you're coming up with. And once you both kind of discuss the algorithm and everything, they'll ask you mostly what is the time complexity of this algorithm? And then you have to answer that, and then they'll probably tell you to start coding it. So this is how it went for me. Some of the interviewers allow you to write in pseudocode, but not all of them. So you would want to be prepared with one proper language. And even before the interview, they ask you which language you're comfortable with, and they'll assign an interviewer according to that answer that you give. So be prepared with one language pretty well. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the interviews. I'll talk about the preparation that I did for Google. So number one thing, you have to start early, which you probably are doing since you've attended this meet, since you're trying to know what it's about. So that's good for you. Uh, but yeah, start early. Start if you can, like go through some questions on code forces, lead code, any of these. Just every day, one question. That would be really good. Um, it it will help you later on as well. So just try to start now if you haven't already. I would say, yeah, obviously you have to practice DSA thoroughly. Like the course of our college does not cover everything that you would need. So you have to like kind of rely on external sources. So yeah, I've given some of those websites that I use to practice. I did like a proper course on Coursera. It was a specialization actually. There was so of the specialization, the first two courses there was algorithms and data structures. I did that like pretty thoroughly. Then I practiced on lead code a lot. Yeah. And code forces like I'd been doing since my first year, got into competitive programming. So that came there. Interview bit, I personally did not use that much, but I've heard that it's pretty good, so I just added it out here. And to study DSA HSA, I went through those four links that are five. There are five links that I gave. So yeah, I would tell you, I would recommend you to go through those. And yeah, so there's this. Can you see the GitHub link, the lead code company wise questions? Those have the questions that Google asked in the previous years. So definitely go through those. They sometimes ask the same question again, so you have an advantage. And yeah, oh, so mock interviews. This is pretty important. If you get selected for interviews, practice with your friends, um, friends, mentors, seniors, anyone. Just pick up a person who will help you practice an interview. It is really important because otherwise, during the interview, it's very, very possible that you go blank. It happens a lot. And you have to be pretty clear with your communication and everything during the interviews. So I would say you need to practice talking to someone while coding and like on the spot thinking of the algorithm and everything. So yeah, practice with mock interviews. And yeah, just be confident throughout the interview. If you get nervous, you will blank out, won't help. So just be confident. I know it's tough, but yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I have to say. Uh, Next week.
Asta, can you take it up?
Uh, yeah. So, right. So, you guys have heard a little about about the timeline. So, what happens is, just before the starting of 3-1, um, you have a bunch of coding rounds for different companies, and if you pass a coding round for a company, you give the interviews for that company, and the coding round is a bunch of DSA questions, like 2 or 3 DSA questions of substantial difficulty. um, like they won't be easy. So I'll talk a little about my preparation, and then yeah, a little about Microsoft, I guess. So what I did was around the time we had this talk for us, so probably around this time, maybe give or take like a week, I started. So I was very slow at coding. Like I'd coded before in like school and in the CP course and stuff, but like my OOP labs used to take a lot of time, more than they were supposed to. So like I wasn't good at it. So yeah, so I used like, so we were told that lead code and interview bit, like medium level questions were what were asked. So I would go to lead codes, like they have a page with like their most popular questions, so I'd go and do those. And like the so a lot of them will be tagged easy, a lot of them will be tagged medium, some of them will be tagged hard. Like I think just the questions at the top of the popular page are questions that are sort of like basic, sort of fundamental, and like a lot of questions to those are similar to those. So like like even if it's taking you a lot of time, like a day, 2 days, just keep trying to think about what the solution should be, like the most optimal solution, and try and code that, and eventually you'll get faster and faster at it. So like um so when I started, I wasn't doing a lot. Like I do it when I had free time, when we had exams I stopped, that sort of thing. And then we did the DSA course. So in the so bits DSA course is, I think, pretty good. If you're not a CS student, maybe you should, like other people would talk about that better, but maybe you should go through that. Definitely do the labs yourself, even if they're not evaluative. Do all the lab questions, no matter how much time they take, because like it builds your fundamentals. um and then I did like during the holidays I did some like CP, competitive programming, um, like those competitions that are on um, Hacker Rank and all of those platforms. Um, so they're not like uh, interview questions are sort of like them, but uh, like competitive programming is different in that there'll be some like interview questions are to, or coding round questions are to like test your fundamentals, and CP questions, you also need those fundamentals, but there'll also be some twist, or like some twist or some trick to the question. But it helps with uh, like knowing how to code, knowing DSA. It's also fun, I think. Um, so that was definitely pretty helpful. And then like I think most importantly, like even if you don't do CP, there's this uh, PU prep material document that has all important topics and a bunch of questions under those topics. And so like I did that in maybe the second half of the holidays, like in maybe 3 or 4 weeks. um at that point, so when I'd started, I didn't spend a lot of time on coding. But like towards the end, where your coding rounds are coming up, then you do spend substantial amount of time on it. Yeah, summer break, the summer break between 2 and 3-1, yes. um so yeah, so they cover, so that document covers all important topics, and graphs are also important, but not, but they're very fundamental, but they're not asked as much in coding rounds. Like occasionally they'll be asked, um, but there are going to be a lot of coding rounds where they, and a lot of interviews as well, where they aren't like touched upon at all. Trees are very important. um yeah so speaking of Microsoft specifically, it was maybe the fourth, fifth, sixth company to come. So pretty early on, before the semester started, actually, a lot of companies came during the semester as well. As far as I remember, the CG criteria was 7.5. So usually, if your CG is above the cutoff, your CG doesn't matter. As long as you cross the cutoff, you'll be allowed to give the coding round, and then it's not really relevant beyond that, except some specific companies do things like resume shortlisting, in which they look at your CG. um, but so in general, um, a CG criteria, a CG above 7.5 passes most cutoffs. And there was like one company that had a CG cutoff above 9, and that company, I don't think it took anyone. And there were like a handful, like maybe two or three, that had a CG cutoff above 8, and there were a few with above 7 as well, but like I think try and pull it up above 7.5, like if that's possible. If that's not, then like there are companies with a cutoff of 7 as well. um right. So right so so you need to practice DSA questions thoroughly. Lead code and interview bit are good platforms for that. um um so so for the coding round, it's just DSA that is asked. And then if you go to an interview, if you pass a coding round, then um, interviews mainly ask DSA. They'll also ask a few questions on like OOP and DBMS, and they'll also ask about your projects. So how interviews generally go is, there are generally 3 rounds of interviews. Um, Generally speaking, maybe 2, maybe 4, but whatever. Um, and the last round is generally an HR interview. Um, so basically, you join the interview. They make some small talk. They're usually very welcoming, and they'll try to make you comfortable. Um, then they might ask you about like they might ask you some OOP questions or DBMS questions. Um, um, I've heard of people being asked like computer network questions and or OS questions and stuff. You generally tell them you haven't covered that in your syllabus. Um, so so they might do that, and they'll probably ask about like your projects or your interests. Um, so over there, you don't need to have like a lot of projects. You don't need to have like a stunning resume or something. um, just so I talked about one project, which was my PS1 project. um, it So it wasn't a very complicated project, um, but like I knew it back to front. So like you should be able to talk about it for like 5 to 10 minutes, and you should know, like if it was a big project and you only did one part, then you should know your part very well, or um, you should know um, whatever you did, what problems you faced, and how you fixed it, what the logic was. A lot of people, I think, also talk about like projects they've done for their courses, like NNF, neural networks and fuzzy logic, or MUPI, that sort of thing. Um, right. So, and then after the project, they ask some DSA questions. over there. So, uh, like coding rounds, you have to do your best to solve them. Um, they're not easy, but they're a little easier than coding rounds. Um, and if you make some mistakes or if you're stuck, you'll get hints. Um, just like uh, it's important not to lose confidence over there and to just keep trying to solve it, even if you've already made several mistakes or you've already gotten several hints, because that's something that's important to them. Seeing that you're going to put in a lot of effort, I guess. So yeah, so that's generally how interviews go, and then there's an HR round at the end as well. So for me, uh, the Microsoft HR round, they also asked a technical question. They also asked a DSA question, and they asked me to summarize previous interviews. Um, yeah. Um, so that's generally how interviews go. Um, and I've attached a link to the prep material document. Um, I can send it over here, although I suggest you're going to get this later anyway, and I suggest um, doing like easier questions on lead code before. I mean, these also have easy questions, but um, more if you do popular questions on lead code or something like that first, it gives you sort of a mixed bag of questions instead of one by one topics, which I thought was better when I was starting out. um, and so Microsoft also holds a program called Engage, um, which I wasn't part of, but I'll just go over it once so you guys know what it's about. So Engage has um, it basically has an entrance round, which for us was an MCQ and coding test. Not it wasn't like a coding round where there were DSA questions, DSA coding questions. There were questions like implement merge sort algorithm, and then there were MCQs on different DSA topics, um, and generally you don't get MCQs in coding rounds, and it was quite based on the college syllabus we've done before. When does Engage happen? Um, I think I think the entrance round happened definitely before coding rounds for internships, like maybe before compres, um, be, before before two compres, as far as I remember. um, but yeah, you have some time right now. um, and then uh, and then I think the bulk of the mentorship, if you